Today, I want to talk about mod loaders. Mod loaders for Minecraft. Because back in the day, in 2011, when the game was just released, there was one big, universally loved mod loader that essentially everyone was using. Minecraft Forge. If you wanted to make a mod for Minecraft back then, you would make it for Forge. And if you wanted to run mods, you would install Forge. That's just the way it was. But nowadays, when you go on Modrinf or CurseForge and you start looking for mods, you don't only have to look if the mod is available for the version you want to run, but also for which mod loaders it is available. Because nowadays we still have Forge, but also Fabric and Quilt and NeoForge. Why are there so many mod loaders? If anything, it only causes a bigger split in the modding community. A developer now has to choose between either releasing a mod on one platform or spending a ton of extra development time making it for 2 or maybe even all 4 platforms. And then there are projects that try to bridge the gap again between these mod loaders like Sinitra Connector and Quilt MC, but how did we even get here? Why are projects like the Connector and Quilt MC needed? We're trying to make bridges between all of these individual islands. But why were all of these islands created in the first place? Why don't we all live on one big island like we used to back in the day? Well, the reason for that is actually quite simple. First, it was just Forge, and Forge was great and universally loved. It has many features and it is a very powerful and massive API. It delivered a ton of tools to mod developers that they could use to make their mods, but eventually a part of the community started to have some issues with Forge. The two main issues were, first of all, Forge was becoming so big and so massive that it started to feel kind of bloated. And because it is such a massive loader, for a lot of PCs, it started to become quite hard to even run. And second, while Forge was still adding features and was still getting developed, they were not adding any massive new features. So Forge was getting updated and they added stuff to the mod loader and the API, but most things that they added were very small features that would only be convenient for a couple of mod developers. But they didn't want to make some drastic changes that could potentially break everything. And this is how in 2018 the Fabric project was publicly announced. Now, there is one thing I want to make very clear, and that is that the 4 mod loaders I'm gonna cover today are not the only mod loaders that exist, and also not the only mod loaders that have existed. There have been many more, and between Forge releasing in 2011 and Fabric releasing in 2018, there have been other mod loaders that have seen the light of day. They were just never as successful as Fabric was, which is why I won't be covering them in this video. But Fabric released in 2018, and the whole premise of Fabric was that it is a lightweight mod loader. That was the goal, and that is still how we see it today. Most people look at Forge as this massive entity of a mod loader that anything you throw at it, it can probably handle, and it will be pretty stable. While Fabric, on the other hand, is this more lightweight mod loader that eventually kind of shifted into this optimization heaven. I've made multiple videos here on the channel talking about optimization mods for Minecraft. And every single time there are at least a couple people commenting something along the lines of, it is so unfair that every single good optimization mod is always just for Fabric. And don't get me wrong, I know that Forge has optimization mods as well, but it is true that most optimization mods for Minecraft always get made for Fabric. And this is not coincidental. First of all, yes, Fabric is a lighter weight mod loader, but it doesn't mean that an optimization mod by definition works better on Fabric. The thing is, when Fabric just released, when it just came out in 2018, Fabric was still very limiting. Like, yes, it was lightweight, but it also just didn't have a lot of the features that Forge did have. So some incredibly complicated and difficult mods, those were, especially at the start, not possible on Fabric. And while a lot more is possible with Fabric now than before, the community has kind of just labeled Forge as the big, massive, bulky mod loader that you want your crazy heavy mods on, and Fabric is this lightweight mod loader that is great for optimization, which is why most optimization mods now are still released for Fabric. Now, something I haven't mentioned yet, but is really important to note, is that Fabric and Forge were completely separate projects from each other. It is not like Fabric was a more optimized fork of Forge. Fabric was its own completely separate thing, and as a result, none of the Forge mods could run on Fabric. And this is of course already where some of the community split started. Now a mod developer had to choose between making a mod for Fabric or for Forge. And of course, they can also release it for both platforms, but as a small developer that doesn't have a big team, this can be very, very time consuming. Also, for some very heavy mods, Fabric might just still not be the right platform, which is why some very heavy mods, like Alex's Caves and Pixelmon, are still exclusive to the Forge platform. Maybe in theory, they can run on Fabric, but it is for sure not as easy as running them on Forge. And this is where it could have stopped. The choice between lightweight and bulky, and we could have just called it a day. But that is not what happened. Because while for 7 years long, Forge was basically the only massive mod loader available, it only took a couple years for a big part of the leadership team of Fabric to split themselves off and create their own brand new mod loader, Quilt MC. Now the story of Quilt is quite interesting. For those who don't know Quilt is a fork of Fabric, meaning that the Quilt team essentially grabbed Fabric and started building upon that. Now the Quilt management team didn't split off of Fabric because they just thought they could do it better. No, the whole reason Quilt was created is because there was a whole bunch of drama and internal disagreements in the management team of Fabric. Now, I don't want to go too much into detail because, quite frankly, I was not there. So I cannot confirm exactly what happened. But I've been able to find multiple stories online that kind of describe what happened. Allegedly, what went down is on the Fabric Discord server, somebody was banned. Somebody that was acting quite transphobic. Now, eventually, that allegedly transphobic person was unbanned. And that unban made a big part of the community mad. But instead of rebanning the transphobic person, the leadership team started banning people who complained about the unban, which eventually led to the Fabric project being labeled as transphobic. Now, I'm sure a lot more happened behind the scenes, and there's probably also more information to find about this. And if anyone knows anything more about it, feel free to leave a comment under this video. But essentially, this whole drama started a number of events, and eventually a big part of the management team of Fabric split themselves off and created Quilt. Now, in my opinion, Quilt is a little bit of an interesting project. Because what is Quilt? Well, Quilt is a lightweight mod loader for Minecraft, just like Fabric. And Quilt can currently run most Fabric mods. Not all, but most. And obviously Fabric can too. And while, of course, the Quilt team is trying to split themselves off from Fabric more and more, and they are trying to improve their mod loader to actually make it better than Fabric, it feels like on the user end, there is not that much of a difference. The biggest difference that Quilt has right now over Fabric is essentially the way the project gets managed. So many things went down behind the scenes at Fabric, and the Quilt team was of course part of that. They knew they never wanted something like this to happen again. So they essentially built a very interesting governance system for Quilt. And I quote, "Quilt takes an unusual approach to the project governance, attempting to avoid giving any one person too much power over the project as a whole. This isn't a particularly easy task, especially when it comes to managing community spaces and platforms like Discord that don't have the concept of group ownership. Quilt attempts to solve this problem by approaching it in a few specific ways. And then they make a big summary of how they try to let a big group of people run this project and not letting one person have too much power. Now, the reason for this is, of course, all the drama that went down at Fabric, where only 1 or 2 people basically had the power over the entire project. And after the whole Fabric being labeled as transphobic drama, many wanted the leader of Fabric to step down, which never ended up happening. Okay, so that is Quilt. But we're not done yet, because only about 1 year ago, a once again brand new mod loader was created called NeoForge. And I wish I could start telling you a very wholesome story of how a part of the Forge team split off because they believed in something great and they wanted something better, but unfortunately that is not the case, because the creation of Quilt and NeoForge kinda have their same roots. Once again, internal disagreement, this time not at the Fabric team, but at the Forge team. Now, once again, I was not there, so it's gonna be hard for me to tell a very detailed story of everything that went down behind the scenes scenes at Forge without knowing if all these stories that go around are actually true. Luckily for us, the NeoForge team themselves have made a big statement about roughly what happened on their own website. And essentially there they say that Lex, the owner of Forge, the leader of the Forge project, that's the problem. Because you could say that Lex is a little toxic. And I quote, "I want to be clear, Lex has been a problem in the modding community for many years. Almost every veteran Minecraft modder has had a negative interaction with him over the past 12 years. I have, when able to, tried to steer people to not abandon Forge just because of Lex." So once again, that's the owner and the leader of the Forge project. Defending him in many private conversations with a frustrated modder who's just been called a for the 1000th time by Lex, or banned from our online spaces for trivial transgression like discussing fabric or core mods. And that is kinda crazy. Just imagine the owner of Forge banning you for even discussing fabric. That is insane. Now here the owner of the current NeoForge project says, "In evaluating the situation I was in, it quickly became clear I could take one of 3 actions. Do nothing. If I did nothing, I believe we would be watching the slow disintegration of the Forge project. 2. Babysitting Lex." In effect, this is what I have been doing, to a more or lesser extent, for the past 10 years. And then 3, do what we have done. Fork the project and start afresh. Now, originally, when NeoForge was just released, every single Forge mod could run on NeoForge. Not the other way around, but all Forge mods would still work. Nowadays though, NeoForge and Forge are growing further apart every single day. And currently, most Forge mods do not run on NeoForge anymore, meaning they basically lost all compatibility. And that leaves us to the end of 2024, the time I'm releasing this video, with us having 4 big popular mod loaders. The original mod loader Forge, the lightweight mod loader Fabric, its fork Quilt, which was made by a split off part of the management team of Fabric, and then NeoForge, a fork of Forge that was also made by a split off part of the management team of Forge. And the question kinda is, what now? Because we now have these 4 mod loaders. And let's say you are a mod developer and you're gonna design a mod. You're gonna code it, but you don't have a massive team and you can only make it for 1 or maybe max 2 platforms. Which platforms are you gonna make it for? Because no matter if we like it or not, Forge, the oldest mod loader, is still the most popular to this day. And while Fabric, especially as of late, has started to get a lot of new users and many people are making the switch, the original team that made these loaders, both Forge and Fabric, are now working on Quilt and NeoForge. So which mod loader to choose? That is hard. Really hard. For both users and mod developers. This is also why nowadays we have mods like Sinitra Connector and Guild MC. Mods that try to bridge the gap between these different mod loaders. So I'm wondering, which mod loader are you using today? And why? What is the reason for you using the one you are using? And also, with a part of the OG Forge team now working on NeoForge, and a big part of the OG Fabric team working on Quilt, do you feel like Quilt and NeoForge will eventually completely replace Fabric and Forge? Or do you think that because of the massive popularity of both Fabric and Forge, they will keep a big part of their user base, no matter what happens behind the scenes internally? I will be curious to know. Definitely leave a comment. And that is gonna be it for today. Do make sure to subscribe to my channel, join my Discord. Thank you so much, channel members. And then I will see you in the next one. Bye bye, see you later, bye bye!